Imagine, if you will, standing at the very precipice of the known world. It is the vast, untamed edge of the American frontier, and the day is dying. The sun does not dip gently here, it plummets, dragging the light away and leaving behind a sky bruised in deep shades of violet and indigo. You are watching the horizon, that endless, flat line where the earth meets the sky, and you realize with a sudden, sharp clarity that there is nothing between you and the coming night. There are no city lights to guide you, no distant hum of traffic, no neighbors within shouting distance. There is only the wind. It is a wind sharper than you ever anticipated, a physical weight that cuts through the heavy wool of your coat and presses against your skin like a cold iron. It whispers through the tall, dry grass, a sound like 1,000 hushed warnings, telling you that the temperature is dropping, and it is dropping fast. You are part of a pioneer family, and you have arrived at this spot just as the twilight begins to surrender to the true dark. This is not the recreational camping of the modern era. There is no village glow waiting over the next hill, no friendly innkeeper to unlatch a door, no soft mattress anticipating your wait. You are realizing, perhaps for the first time, the sheer indifference of this landscape. The Great Plains do not care if you are tired. They do not care if you are cold. A well-known reality of 19th century westward expansion is that thousands of families were forced to make camp exactly where the sunset caught them. Tonight, the sunset has caught you here, in the middle of nowhere, and the pressure of time is suddenly the heaviest burden you carry. Every minute of fading light is a resource more valuable than gold. You look around instinctively for shelter, but the land is wide and unforgiving. There are no thick forests to block the gale, just the rolling ocean of grass and the low, hard ground that seems ready to swallow any sound you make. The cold here is not the crisp, invigorating chill of a winter walk. It is a predatory cold. It tests your plans. It tests your patience. It tests the very limits of your body. History tells us that many who came this way underestimated this climate, viewing the open land as an opportunity rather than an adversary. Standing here now, with the frost already biting at your toes inside your boots, you understand how easy it would be to make that mistake. You understand that if you do not build something, anything, before the light vanishes completely, the night will take more from you than you can afford to give. The first night is always the hardest, simply because you do not yet know the rules of this place. You do not know what the wind will do after midnight. You do not know how the earth will sap the heat from your bones. You only know that you must move, and you must move now. Your hands are already stiff as you begin to unload the wagon. Every object you touch feels heavier than it did at noon. The iron rim of a wheel, the wooden side of a crate, the canvas cover. Everything has taken on the temperature of the air, radiating a dull, aching cold. When you set a heavy box down, the sound is flat and swallowed by the wind. Even the air you breathe feels different here. It is thin, dry, and sharp, biting at the back of your throat with every inhalation. It is often said in the journals of early settlers that the first night set the tone for the entire winter. It was a psychological benchmark. If you could build a fire, create a shelter, and sleep through that first biting darkness, you could convince yourself that you could survive the season. If you slept poorly, if the cold found its way into your marrow, the prairie would seem to punish you for your arrogance. Driven by this thought, you and your family move with a desperate efficiency. There is no energy left for conversation. Words are wasted breath, and breath is heat. You guide the children, not with harshness, but with a firm urgency, keeping them moving, keeping their blood flowing, because to stand still is to invite the frost in. As the darkness truly thickens, turning the world from gray to absolute black, the sounds of the prairie shift. During the day, the wind sings. At night, it prowls. It moves lower to the ground, brushing against the dry stalks of grass like unseen fingers. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote calls, a lonely, yipping sound that emphasizes your isolation. You strike a match, and the smell of sulfur flares briefly before the wood catches. You realize how small your fire is in this vastness. It is just a trembling circle of orange light fighting against an ocean of shadow. Many pioneer families had to rely on these open campfires for weeks before a proper cabin could be raised. exposing them to the whims of the elements night after night. You crouch near the flames, extending your hands, and for a moment the relief is intoxicating. The heat touches your palms, your face, but you know this comfort is a lie. If you step back just 3 feet, the warmth vanishes as if it never existed. The fire is not a solution. It is a temporary truce with the winter. You look at the makeshift shelter you have constructed. It is crude, a lean-to of wagon boards and canvas, perhaps some sod stacked against the windward side. It is not pretty. It would not impress the people back east, but it stands, and standing means a chance. You lie down at last, fully dressed, your boots loosened but not removed, a habit learned quickly on the trail. You keep your boots close because you might need to move, or tend the fire, or chase away a predator at a moment's notice. The ground beneath you is hard and is already leaching the day's warmth away. You have laid out blankets, every layer you own, treating them like precious armor. You test the soil with your hand and pull back quickly. It's like touching a block of ice. You understand now why the indigenous people and the seasoned trappers spoke of the earth as something that could either hold you or drain you. Tonight, it feels hungry.
Sleep feels impossible to imagine. The wind whistles through gaps you didn't see in the twilight. It slips through the seams of your clothing, finding the skin of your neck, your wrists, your ankles. This first night teaches you the most essential lesson of the frontier. Survival is not about being comfortable. It is about managing discomfort just enough to see the sunrise. As you close your eyes, the cold presses in again, testing every weakness in your shelter. You drift in and out of a shallow rest, aware of the fire popping, aware of the breathing of your family, aware of the vast empty miles surrounding you. You realize that tomorrow and the night after that will ask the same question. Can you adapt, or will the winter take what it wants? Morning, when it finally arrives, does not bring warmth. It brings a pale gray light that reveals the world in stark relief. You wake stiff, your joints protesting the hard ground and the chill. Your breath fogs in the air before your face, a little cloud of life in the freezing shelter. The fire has collapsed into a heap of gray ash and dull red embers, and the cold rushes back into the space the moment you throw off a blanket. This is the second lesson the prairie teaches. The night is not something you endure once, it repeats, and if you do not improve your shelter today, tonight will be exactly the same. You step outside and the cold greets you like an old rival. The light reveals what the darkness hid. Your camp is exposed, fragile, a tiny speck on a white frosted plain. The wind slides freely across the land, unhindered by trees or hills, picking up speed until it hits your face. It is a well-documented fact in frontier history that many families rushed the construction of their cabins not for the sake of room or comfort, but simply to create a windbreak. The wind was the true enemy. Low temperatures you could dress for. A relentless wind that stripped heat away from your home was a different beast. You feel it now, slipping through the seams of your coat. There is no time for perfection. Shelter must come first. You gather the materials you have hauled across hundreds of miles, logs if you are lucky enough to be near a creek bed, wagon boards if you are not, sods of earth cut from the very ground that tried to freeze you last night. Everything becomes a potential wall or roof. You work with a rhythm, lift, set, brace, repeat. Your breath settles into a steady pattern, and the movement brings a welcome warmth back into your fingers. The sound of the axe, the hammer, the saw, it echoes sharply in the crisp air. Each sound feels amplified by the emptiness around you. There is a comfort in the noise. Silence would mean stopping, and stopping means freezing. You may have heard that early cabins were often built slightly crooked or with walls that leaned. Some folklore suggests families did this on purpose to confuse spirits or avoid bad luck. But standing here, hands numb and shoulders aching, you know the truth. You build what your body can manage today. You do not care about straight lines. You care about closing the gaps where the wind gets in. As the structure takes shape, it looks fragile. There are spaces between the logs. The roof is thin. Snow will find a way in. But when you step inside the half-finished shell, the air feels different. It moves slower. Your breath lingers. The cold hasn't vanished, but it hesitates. That hesitation is everything. You spend the afternoon packing mud, clay, and dry grass into the cracks between the logs, a process known as chinking.
Your fingers burn as the cold, wet clay presses against your skin. The smell of damp earth rises around you, sharp and mineral. It is a primitive smell, but to you it smells like safety. Diaries from this era often mention that settlers would use anything to seal their homes: moss, animal hair, even strips of newspaper or old cloth, if it meant stopping the draft. You light the fire again, this time inside your new walls. Smoke curls upward, searching for the vent in the roof. Some of it escapes, but much of it hangs low, filling the room. It stings your eyes and clings to your throat, a thick, woodsy scent. Yet most settlers accepted this trade-off without complaint. Breathing smoke was unpleasant. Breathing freezing air was deadly. You sit close to the hearth, backs against the rough wood, and feel how the shelter changes the sound of the world. The wind outside becomes a muffled presence, a dull roar rather than a scream. It is no longer tearing at your clothes, it is tearing at the logs, and the logs are holding. Night arrives quietly this time. The stars appear through the cracks in the roof, distant and cold but less threatening now. You lie down on the hard floor, perhaps on a mattress of pine boughs or dried grass if you have found any. You are layered in every piece of clothing you own. This too is a learned habit. You do not undress for bed, you dress for it. You listen to the fire crackle, a softer sound now that it is contained. Sleep will still be shallow, but as you close your eyes, you understand something important. Tonight, the cold has to work harder to reach you. You have bought yourself a margin of safety. You wake before dawn, not because you are fully rested, but because the cold has found its way through the walls again. It slips in quietly, settling against your face until your body decides it has had enough. You sit up slowly, careful not to disturb the others. The cabin creaks as the wood contracts in the deep freeze. Outside, the wind drags itself across the snow. You realize then that your shelter is truly alive in its own way. It breathes, it shifts, it reacts to the weather. The boards have shrunk overnight, leaving hairline gaps that glow with the pale blue light of the morning. This was common. Early cabins were rarely airtight, especially in their first winter when the green wood dried and warped. You run your hand along a seam and feel a ribbon of icy air. You spend the morning taming those gaps. You press more mud into the corners. You hammer scraps of cloth over the worst offenders. Each small improvement makes a difference you can feel immediately. The air holds still. The fire burns slower because the draft is controlled. There is a quiet frustration in this work. You are not building a palace, you are chasing tolerability. You are trying to make the space livable, not luxurious. Many pioneers wrote that their cabins didn't feel warm so much as less cruel. But that difference, as small as it sounds, is the difference between life and death.
By afternoon, you are gathering fuel with a new seriousness. You have learned that firewood is not just a chore, it is the only thing standing between you and the void. Without enough fuel stacked and ready inside the door, the night could turn dangerous long before morning. You build your fire carefully, keeping it low and compact. A tall, roaring flame looks impressive, but it wastes wood and sends the heat straight up the chimney. A low bed of coals radiates heat outward, steady and long-lasting. This was a technique passed down through necessity. Waste meant cold, and control meant rest. A curious practice, rarely mentioned in history books but found in the oral histories of the time, involved banking the coals. Before sleep, you rake the hot embers together and cover them lightly with ash. This starves the fire of just enough oxygen to keep it from burning out, preserving the heat in the heart of the wood until morning. It allows you to revive the fire in seconds with a few breaths of air, rather than struggling with frozen flint and steel in the pre-dawn dark. You do this now, your hands moving with practiced care. One mistake could scatter sparks onto the dry floorboards, and fire was a terror greater than the cold. You keep a bucket of water near the fire, though you know it will likely have a crust of ice by morning. Its presence is a comfort. As the evening deepens, the fire changes character. The sharp snap of fresh wood softens into a steady, rhythmic murmur. Shadows stretch and dance along the walls. The smell of wood smoke, unwashed wool, and drying leather fills the cabin. It is a dense, heavy scent, but it signals survival. You sit close enough to the fire to feel the heat on your face,
while your back remains cool. You learn to rotate like a planet orbiting a sun, letting each side of your body take its turn absorbing the warmth. There is a peace in the cabin now. The anxiety of the first night has faded into a routine. You watch the children. They sit closer to the fire than usual, their eyes reflecting the orange glow. They accept the smoky air and the hard floor without complaint. Children on the frontier adapted with a speed that often surprised their parents. As the hours pass, the fire seems to stretch time. You feed it sparingly, adding small logs rather than large ones, conserving your resources. An interesting detail that appears in many pioneer journals is the way families slept. Privacy was a luxury that winter did not allow. Separate beds were impractical. Entire households slept in a single cluster, bundling together. Body heat was a resource to be shared, not hoarded. You arrange the bedding on a raised platform if you have built one. Keeping off the frozen floor can save precious degrees of heat. You lay down the thickest quilts underneath you to insulate against the cold rising from below, and the lighter, fluffier blankets on top to trap the air. You lie down, pressed shoulder to shoulder with your family. At first, it feels awkward, a violation of personal space you were used to back east. But as the fire dims and the cold creeps from the corners of the room, you feel the logic of it. The warmth of the person next to you is a lifeline. The sound of their breathing anchors you. You are not facing the dark alone. Toward the deepest part of the night, the temperature plummets. You feel it as a tightening in your chest, a heaviness in the air. You do not wake fully, but you shift, pulling the blankets tighter, tucking your chin into your collar. This is a survival instinct kicking in. You are sleeping lightly, hovering just below consciousness, ready to wake if the fire dies too low or if a child kicks off a cover. This watchman's sleep leaves you tired in the morning, but it keeps everyone safe. Some researchers suggest that the pioneer diet played a huge role in winter survival. You eat differently now. Dinner is heavy, stews thickened with flour, fatty meats, anything that digests slowly. A full stomach generates internal heat for hours, acting like a furnace inside your body. You noticed earlier that if you went to bed hungry, you woke up shivering. Now you make sure everyone eats a hot, substantial meal as the sun goes down, even if rations are tight. It is an investment in the night. As you drift off, you notice the sounds of the night have changed. You hear the wind, yes, but you also hear the heavy breathing of the livestock you may have brought into a lean-to against the cabin wall, or perhaps even inside if they are young and vulnerable. Their body heat adds to yours. Their presence breaks the feeling of isolation. You are a small pod of life in a frozen ocean. Morning comes slowly. You wake to the sound of birds testing the frozen air, the first signal that the sun is near. You open your eyes to see the cabin filled with a gray, diffused light. You are stiff, your breath still clouds in the air, but you are warm enough. You have survived another cycle. You rise, stiffly, but without the panic of the first day. You stir the banked coals, and the fire blooms back to life, chasing the shadows into the corners. You break the ice on the water bucket, a morning ritual that no longer annoys you, but simply marks the start of the day. You step outside. The sun is rising, painting the snow in brilliant shades of pink and gold. The world is incredibly bright, blindingly white. It is beautiful, but it is a beauty that offers no warmth. You pull your coat tight, grab the axe, and head for the woodpile. The work continues. The night will come again. But you are ready. You have learned the rhythm of the winter. You have learned that you do not conquer the cold. You negotiate with it, hour by hour, layer by layer, log by log. And in that negotiation, in that quiet, stubborn persistence, you have found a way to call this wild, frozen place home.